After 50 plus years of trying, Republicans have finally killed public media. Yeah, I saw that. Actually, like, very sad. RIP PBS. Yeah, public broadcasting is going down due to federal fund cuts. It's not going to be the end of NPR and PBS because they're both going to be relying more on private donations, but there is a bunch of like less public, less well-funded public broadcasting stuff that's going to go down. Some rural areas might not be able to get emergency alerts without NPR. Well, NPR will still exist. But even if that was true, they would deserve it. Who cares, TechWiz? What about Sesame Street? Like I said, NPR and PBS will still be funded, but they're going to have to rely on private donations. The announcement follows a largely party-line vote last month that approved the cuts to public broadcasting as part of a $9 billion rescissions package requested by the White House that also included cuts to foreign aid. Yay. Young children are going to be raised pretty much entirely on Coco Melon and Mr. Beast now. I guess it's been like that for a while, right? NPR news chief announced she's leaving days after Congress kills federal funding. Yeah, what else is there to do? You know? It's all gutted. Kids still watch PBS sometimes. I mean, I'm sure there are some kids somewhere doing that, but my impression of the average child rearing experience right now is not one that's letting the kids get much like educational attainment. I don't know. It seems like a lot of iPad babies. Public broadcasting in Europe is so much more accepted and normal than in America. Public everything's more accepted over there. This is where PBS's funding comes from. Yeah, give me the breakdown. Individual contributions kicking quite a bit. Government support, that shit's done. Community engagement, production of the revenues, corporate and foundation support. Well, individual contributions are going to have to make up that portion of the slice. That's PBS. I don't know what NPR's split looks like, but according to NPR typically receives less than 2% of its funds from federal sources, but federal funding makes up a greater share of member stations' revenue, 8 to 10%. PBS and its member stations receive on average about 15% of revenue from U.S. taxpayers. Okay, now that tracks with what this says, more or less. Don't fascists want public-funded media they control? No, fascists love private media. They just like work directly with private media to ensure the right message is being propagated. NPR is brought by listeners like you. Yeah, I've heard that rumor. I've heard that rumor. You think it's possible for blue states to set up some system to help PBS state funding? I don't know. Honestly, them. NPR needs to get more radical, okay? I'm tired of their pissy both sides liberal bullshit. Look where it led them.
Meantime, President Trump's federal cuts continue to have sweeping impacts. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is shutting down early next year. The organization allocates funds to NPR and PBS.
Oh, hold on. Bill Nye talked about this. What are you up to, man? I haven't seen you in ages.
And also viewers like you, if you are one of the millions of Americans who grew up watching beloved shows carried on your local PBS station, Mr. Rogers, Berenstain Bears, I missed it, but 321 Contact, my colleagues here tell me, is another one. You're not going to hear that little message anymore. The CBP announcing today that it's shutting its doors after Congress eliminated its federal funding and clawed back.
You know, in a contradictory kind of way, I wonder if no longer relying on federal funding might actually make PBS feel comfortable leaning a little bit more left. Like, I wonder if some of their purported impartiality was motivated by the federal funding. And, like, dude, conservatives are not privately funding PBS, you know? I wonder if they'd be comfortable kicking loose a little bit more.
$1.1 billion in funds that had already been approved. Joining us now is Bill Nye, the science guy. His show ran on PBS for 5 years, but it has, of course, been replayed, rewatched by millions all over the world. I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
They do get corporate funding, too? Yeah, but you just saw the slice. The corporate funding is a tiny fraction of what they get compared to public funding.
To talk about this, because the first thing I thought of when I heard this news was hearing that, brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which I must have seen hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of times during my childhood when I was watching you and these other iconic shows. Can you just talk a little bit about what the corporation meant for the work that you did and for the kids that you served?
Well, it's why the show became so popular. So for you broadcast historians, the Science Guy show started out in syndication at 22 minutes, 30 seconds, and then it ended up on public broadcasting with an extra 5 minutes of programming every day. So if you have a copy of those old shows, hang on to them. But with that in mind, that's where the show, the Science Guy show, became very, very popular. And it has served, the show has served to educate people in elementary science.
Damn, he sounds old as... Honestly, he looks almost exactly like what he looked like 30, 35 years ago, which is crazy. Like, the underlying facial structure is almost exactly the same. considering how long it's been.
Science for decades, and I'm honored, and it's wonderful. It's great. But part of the reason it was so successful, or is so successful, is we had very compelling research that 10 years old was as old as you could be to get the so-called lifelong passion for science. And it's probably as old as you can be to get a lifelong passion for anything. And I mention it because...
That shit is done, by the way. We're cutting so many federal grants to so many different scientific branches. We're basically just handing the reins of innovation over to China, you know? Which I suppose international megacorporations probably prefer because the cost of labor is lower over there.
It was based on research. It was based on science. It was based on provable facts. And that's what shaped the Science Guy show and made it so successful. The same is true of Sesame Street, and the same is true of Mr. Rogers and other shows. So what's going on, everybody, is a little bit in the weeds. The administration is trying to use these rules or laws, which were clearly, in my opinion, clearly never intended to be used this way, to derail the will of Congress. And so they're using these, apparently they're planning to use this business of impoundment of funds and this extraordinary new legal theory, pocket rescission. And there's no such thing. They're making it up. And the irony is that the communities that are going to be most affected by curtailing public broadcasting are the rural communities that voted for this administration. And I just, as one example, I have met countless people, that is to say more people than I can count, who came to this country from other parts of the world and tell me that they learned to speak English by watching public broadcasting, by watching my show.
That makes sense. Now it's like Labubu unboxings, I guess, is where most people would get there. I don't know. It's a different era. It's a worse era. You can literally see this happening in the performance shoe market of all things. Chinese companies are snatching up all the top NBA stars. That's how it is. Is it Chinese companies or is it the Chinese branches of like international companies? It's weird to think about that, but like so many of these American companies, like they're made in America, they're registered in America, you know, we might end up being effectively the subsidiaries. We might end up being like the second branch, as it were. It's weird to think about, but like in 10, 20 years, you really think that people are going to think of like Adidas or Nike in the context of America?
Show by watching Sesame Street. And one of the ideas of this administration, which is nominally quite reasonable, is to make English the official language.
Adidas is German? Yeah, but nobody thinks of it that way, I guess. At least I don't as an American. Maybe a European might. Adidas to me comes across as one of those like mega corporations that just is a branch of Western commerce, I guess. It literally stands for Adolf Dassler. Who the f cares? Why the f would that be relevant to me at all? Did you know, dude, Adidas isn't a German country? Did you know it was founded by Wigwam von Weinspiel? I don't care. No one gives a shit. What matters is where business is done, where commerce is actually done, you know? So there are a lot of the beer companies that are thought of as American, even though they're owned or like licensed under companies. This is bullshit. International corporations are international, but there is a difference in where corporations actually spend their time doing business, right? Like, I'll put it this way. Nintendo is a Japanese company, but Nintendo does a lot of business here in America. Do you think that Nintendo is equally American as it is, say, Venezuelan or Portuguese? I mean, it's a Japanese company, right? So, like, so it's any other country that isn't Japanese, you'd think they'd all be kind of like have equal claim. Of course not, right? Nintendo is second an American company. But what if in the future it's second a Chinese company? You know? Nah, you get what I'm getting at.
Well, if you want people to learn English, you want to have public broadcasting. This is just an ironic mess up on their part. Back to you, Casey.
Sir, one big difference, too, with public broadcasting and its funding is that the focus is on things like the science, things like what you learn from Sesame Street, and not on advertisements. I think I was only allowed to watch PBS growing up as a child. I think in no small part because my mom cared a lot about that. She didn't want me to have to think about the latest toy that I wanted to buy, but just to be there and learn things. What does that mean for kids?
Well, so part of the reason
Bosch always does this when he's objectively wrong. About what? It doesn't matter where a company is registered. What matters is where it invests time, money, and advertising dollars doing business. That's the main thing that matters. The actual registration of a company with the country that it's rooted in is much less important than that. It's a factoid. It's trivia. Capital is international. The point that I'm making is that Americans are probably in the near future not going to be considered a primary market for a lot of international corporations, which is, for me as an American, a little scary to think about. Which not fairly so, right? That's a kind of a window into the dark heart of American exceptionalist bias. I'm used to being catered to as the number one, main character of international commerce. It's just kind of weird to think yeah, man, in the future, it's not that America will be non-existent on the global economic stage. It's more I don't know, we're going to be Spain or France. Yeah, there's business in Spain and France. They buy things there. But when they buy things, oftentimes the advertising they're getting, the exposure they're getting is kind of downstream of other countries' exposure and advertising, which is what the whole world has been for America for a long time, right? All over the world, people get products, they get movies, they get services that are framed in the context of it being an American good, even if the company is not explicitly registered in America. Maybe I'm not making the point well.
The Science Guy show was through this thing called the Children's Television Act, because in the 1980s, back in the 20th century, children's television was becoming an ads for toys. Which is, if you're a kid, that's fun. You watch a superhero animated show, and then you can buy a physical object, a doll, a action figure of that superhero. Yeah. That's fun and cool, but it doesn't have the educational value that people in the early 1990s wanted children's programming to have. And for you historians, there was required. Television stations were required to have 3 hours of educational programming a week. 3 hours, oh my goodness, our ability to print money is being stopped, oh my. But that turned out to be to the good, and it led to this, in my day, it led to this collaboration between commercial programming, commercial stations and public broadcasting, but it never would have happened without the influence of public broadcasting. So the plan right now is to cut it $1.1 billion through this new legal theory.
It's so little, too. $1.1 billion. That's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. That's federal contribution for public broadcasting. It's nothing. Yeah, I don't know. It used to be that PBS was the babysitter, right? When the parents were busy, you sit the kid in front of the TV. They watch, I don't know, they could watch Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street or whatever. But nowadays it's the iPad. I bet you the ratings are way down in these shows, and it's pretty unfortunate. I don't know.
That I'm sure, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure it will be shown to be illegal, what they're trying to do. But this all takes time. Takes time and time and time. And when you break stuff, it's much harder to put it back together. Take an example from your life. Have a dinner plate. Breaking a dinner plate just takes a moment. Making a dinner plate from scratch requires a factory and centuries of technological development. It's the real deal, everybody. Push back. And something that fascinates me, I don't know how many of your viewers watch the other side, the very conservative media outlets, but they are fascinated with what goes on the mainstream media like this cable news network. So keep up the good work, because it will leak through to the other side. Thank you.
All right. Bill Nye, very grateful to have you. Thank you very much.
The Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
I don't know. It's just really grim to think about. I didn't even watch much of it growing up. I guess I'm young enough that I was right over the peak, right? Like when I was growing up, I was just getting into computer. I wasn't really watching TV that much. I'm a little too young for that. Maybe it's just past the time. Maybe. Yeah, I'm a couple years older than you. I watched all the time. Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I literally, like, I am at the age where once you're old enough to start giving a shit about watching media, I could have done it on a computer. On those old, I had the old iMac. You know, the Macintosh computer, the one that had the colored plastic panel on the back so you could see the internals of the computer, which was just around the point where computers were getting, like, usable enough and ubiquitous enough that you could have a kid sit down and, like, have fun on the computer with, like, the early internet or whatever else. Yeah, the family computer era. According to Vosh's logic, the East India Company was all about India, the British Empire. What the f*** are you talking about? I don't even... From a new chatter, too. What are you talking about? Why can't people just disagree with me normally? The internet, this is why you need publicly funded broadcasting. You're probably 20 years or younger. You could have benefited from being raised on media which was produced by people with a more impartial mindset, or maybe people who act a little more normally, but instead you grew up watching, like, YouTubers, and now when you disagree with somebody, you're constructing, like, strawman hypotheticals in your head to epically roast them in a private website that hosts their chat. You need to shape up, okay? It's unironically, it is one of the reasons why people are getting more antisocial. Becoming social takes education. It's just not innate in your head. You have to be educated into being sociable, how to engage with people, what is or isn't weird or rude or polite or whatever. And it used to be that when young people were watching, like, you know, television on their own or something, they were being sat down to watch Sesame Street. And I think watching Sesame Street probably does a good job preparing a young person for the emotional, you know, rigor of needing to go out into the world and engage with people in an interpersonal setting. But nowadays, the Coco Melon, Labubu, whatever. I don't think the same works. Just finish the damn video.
Has just announced that it will soon shut down because of the successful Republican-led efforts to defund local PBS and NPR stations across the country. Of course, last week, President Trump signed a law clawing back congressionally approved federal funding for public media and foreign aid as well.
CNN's Brian Stelter broke this story. So, Brian, what does this mean for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and for public broadcasting?
This means the money is officially drying up effective September 30th. And so the nonprofit agency that sent this money out to local stations across the country is shutting down. About 100 staffers losing their jobs. This is a political victory for President Trump because he tried several different ways this year to defund public media, to take out this Corporation for Public Broadcasting. He even tried to fire 3 of the board members, resulting in a lawsuit in federal court. Well, now that lawsuit is moot. It's going away because the entire corporation is going away.
Cool.
The federal funds will stop effective at the end of September because of the rescissions. And there was a recent effort earlier this week in Congress to try to find a new way to try to get money for NPR and PBS. That fell flat as well. There's simply no way the Republicans are going to budget money for NPR and PBS right now due to allegations of bias at those networks. So these local stations will be they're the ones that will suffer, and they're going to suffer in different ways. You know, I was speaking to the head of a public media network in Hawaii that said, look, it was only 6% of our budget. 94% of the budget there is from other...
Vosh, Blippi, Miss Rachel, and other YouTube channels are great for kids. It's not all as bad as you're implying. Yeah, but think before you speak. Because it used to be, when Sesame Street was the game in town, every parent knew that they existed. You turn the TV on, there's PBS, Sesame Street, sit the kid down. Now, a parent has to know what Miss Rachel is. And the window for that, I guess, like the level of cultural exposure, it's much more narrow. You're not going to get the same kind of culture, like the widespread knowledge that you got of Sesame Street. And God, man, like just for the incredibly like small amount of money that it has cost relative to the stuff the government spends money on, Sesame Street is like a monolith in culture. It's crazy if you think about it, how much influence Sesame Street has had, the legacy that it's left, the power that it's had, not just in America. Sesame Street is an international phenomenon, all because of a dedicated and relatively low-cost effort by the government to, if I recall correctly, try to better prepare young children for entering school. Like they were interested in trying to make sure low-income children had a better like leg up when it came to properly integrating in a school environment when it finally came time to go to kindergarten or first grade or whatever. Doesn't this cheap educational stuff also literally just convert to more tax dollars in the future? Yep. Yeah. As is the case, study after study have found there are so many ways you make money in the future by investing in people's youth and education, right? WIC spending, housing first homelessness solutions, stuff like this. You know, it all pays more in the long run. But of course, it's not about making money. How the average child learns today.
Okay, let's go.
You can't deny it's pretty effective. This would work on 99% of chat. It works on me. I'm learning. I'm learning a lot. I'm really, I'm being sold on this. Do you think we could make up the shortfall in funding by having PBS just play stuff like this? The unaliving of Emmett Till, etc. Not even joking? No, I'm not joking. Genuinely. One thing that's really important, I think a lot of lefties have trouble with this. Don't imitate the aesthetics of the past, right? People change, culture changes. If you want to be relevant, you have to keep up. Fascists understand this. If you want like public broadcast education, yeah, there will need to be an effort. Sesame Street is antiquated, and you can tell when you watch it. Sesame Street does not hit today the way it used to. Most of the time when you guys hear about Sesame Street in a positive light, you hear about it in the context of like nostalgia baiting for old people. You know, it's like, oh my God, wow, it's just like when I was a kid or something. You know, but yeah, to keep up. Being a little aggressive, being a little forward thinking, it's important. How is this any different from the hip educational rap in the 90s? Well, I think that a lot of that stuff was like, in retrospect, we laugh, but a lot of it was received fine. But I think a lot of the stuff that wasn't received fine was because it was being done by white people in their 60s who had no idea what 90s street hip hop culture looked like. And they were just like hiring C-tier hip-hop artists from their city to record like to rap out like lines they had written about, I don't know, paying your taxes or something. But I'm like, you have to do it well, of course. It's easier than ever before to onboard, you know, young people with fresh ideas. Same can be argued for Simpsons, SpongeBob, Rick and Morty, etc. Yeah, time moves forward. That's how it moves. I don't know, man. I feel like you could get a lot done with this. You could really educate people. Do not compare SpongeBob to this shit. Nostalgia is a fascist impulse. Grow past it. You don't need it. What about The Amazing World of Gumball? What about The Amazing World of Gumball? What are we talking about? You guys have an incredible talent for ignoring the point of a segment and diverting into any adjacent interest you have. I really do have a lot of autists in my community. I tell you, nobody ruder than an autist. You know that? You can just talk about them, or you can talk to them about anything in the world. Doesn't matter how important it is, how special it is to you. They latch on to the one thing they're interested in, and then as soon as you stop talking, they're like, did you bring up The Amazing World of Gumball? Well, you didn't mention it, but we were, briefly, cartoons were mentioned. Not in the context of cartoons, but in the context of culture moving forward. Anyway, let's talk about The Amazing World of Gumball.